So, again, historically, the California law has been written with very specific limitations on food carts, so that basically hot dog carts, churro carts, and snow cone carts, the law limited those food coming from carts to those few specific items. Now this law has expanded that and allows many, many more types of foods from these carts. It also lowers the requirements to make it easier to get a permit, so that folks can get out in business legally. Okay. Some important things to know is basically what is a potentially hazardous food. So our talk is going to refer to PHFs, or potentially hazardous foods, several times. But potentially hazardous food is foods that requires time or temperature control to ensure the food is safe. It's basically things that can spoil if they're left out of temperature. So animal products, meat products, dairy products, cooked vegetables, all of these things are potentially hazardous and need to be maintained at a safe temperature. Pre-packaged good, so non-potentially hazardous food, the next definition down is things that do not require temperature control. Pre-packaged chips and candies and M&Ms and gum and things like this, bottled waters and sodas are not potentially hazardous. Okay, sorry, I'm going to slow down a little bit. I just have tons of information to get to. And lastly, pre-packaged food are items that are commercially packaged and labeled. Again, things, chips, snacks, gum, candy, things like that are pre-packaged. Also, foods that you can pre-package in a approved kitchen can be pre-packaged. Okay. So what is a compact mobile food operation? That's CMFO. And we're going to see that acronym, a million times in our slides today. A compact mobile food operation is defined in the law as an individual, a push cart, a stand, display, pedal-driven cart, wagon, showcase, rack, or non-motorized conveyance. So that captures a lot of different things. Really, the intent was to allow most street vendors to meet the requirements to get a permit. So the hot dog stand on the left, the kind of generic produce stand here, or food stand there, a small rack like you might see on a convenience store counter. And then this gentleman on the street right here, I just pulled this picture off of the internet. The way the cart and the operation is right now in this photo does not meet the requirements for the law, but with a few minor changes, he could be in compliance. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So small amounts of pre-packaged foods that are commercial, that are shelf stable, are exempt from having to get a permit. So things like produce, whole, uncut, uncooked produce, chips, candy bars, snacks, things like this. As long as there's less than 25 square feet of display area, are exempt from obtaining a permit. Okay, so that's a big, one of the big major changes. The food needs to be safe for human consumption, obviously, so, and packaged and labeled and shelf stable. Okay, so foods, chips, candy bars, gums, bottled water, sodas, things like this. Again, there's no permit required in order to sell these shelf-stable pre-packaged foods. Okay, as long as it's that less than 25 square feet. Folks that are operating this way are still subject to an inspection. If an inspector sees that and wants to ask questions about what foods you're selling and check out the stand, the law does still allow us to do an inspection there, even if a permit has not been issued. Okay. This is a lot of language from the law. Okay, I'm not going to spend time going over this, but this is what is in the legal definition of limited food prep. So limited food preparation is what's allowed from these carts. So I have all that here, and also what is not limited food prep. So those are both important definitions in our code. Again, I made this information for our inspectors. but I have it all in here so that everybody can refer to it later on. But we're gonna break it down so we don't have to go over that long. The expansion of limited food prep with this new bill 972 no longer limits these food operations to hot dogs, churros, and snow cones, which I've already mentioned. Cutting fruit on the cart itself is now allowed. That was never allowed in the previous California law. So now we can cut fruit on that cart as long as it has a hand washing station with cold water and also has some type of commercial NSF approved refrigerator. Okay, so there are some requirements still to make sure the food is safe for the public. But these things that have never been allowed by California law are now actually allowed with a few conditions. Okay. Hot holding and assembly of foods is now allowed. Again, previously that was not acceptable under California code. Okay. A big requirement of this though is that the foods be prepared in an approved facility. So someplace that our department knows about, someplace that is up to code, has all the correct necessary equipment. So that is a big portion of this as well. We're lowering the requirements on the carts, but the food has to be prepared in a permitted and safe facility. So a compact cart that has limited food prep, as opposed to the exempt cart where everything is prepackaged and shelf stable. Now we've got a compact cart with some food or food that does require temperature control. So this would be, for example, our corn vendors, or could be lots of different types of food, but any food that has is potentially hazardous, that requires temperature control, is going to need proper equipment to make sure that that food is a safe temperature. Okay, so that's either going to be a steam table to keep foods hot, it's going to be a refrigerator to keep foods cold. There must be a hand wash station on the cart, but as long as there's no raw meat being handled on that cart, then a hot water heater is not required. That's a huge change for our inspectors. Hot water has always been a big requirement. But again, the legislators have heard the community, heard the public, and lowered these standards to make it more accessible for folks. So hot water heaters are not required unless raw meat is being handled. Okay. And also a wash sink is not required on the cart as long as the cart can be equipped with extra utensils, spare utensils and cutting boards, knives and tongs and things like that. Okay. Some additional changes: a food safety manager certificate, which is required for all food facilities and food trucks. That requirement has been lowered or lightened a little bit to allow food handler cards. So as long as everybody that is working on or with this cart or the compact mobile food operation gets a food handler card, then a food safety manager certificate is not required. Okay, so that's another big change. Also, restrooms are not required within 200 feet of that compact mobile food operation. If employees can rotate the use of that restroom, maybe say there's 2 or 3 employees for that cart, and they can take turns heading to the restroom, then the cart does not need to be within 200 feet of a restroom facility. Okay, again, another big change to our cart, to our law. There's another portion of the law talks about a permitted auxiliary conveyance for a site-specific location, which basically means that your hand wash sink and your 3-compartment sink for washing dishes can be separate from the carts themselves in an approved spot. So, there might be a few venues that I can imagine something like this for a sports stadium or a big venue like that where we can have the sink and the hand wash sink and the washing sink separate from the carts, all in a designated area. So there is allowance in the code for that, again, to make it easier for street vendors to get out and get permits. If the cart owner owns the sink, then they just go together with the same permits for the carts. However, if the owner of that wash sink and hand wash sink does not also own the carts, then that washing sink, the permitted auxiliary conveyance, also needs its own permit. Sorry, that's a little bit confusing. We're going to keep on going. So what facilities can support the compact mobile food operation? How does this thing work? So the law allows the cart to be stored at home. Okay, the cart itself can be, the compact mobile food operation, I keep calling it a cart, but it's supposed to be called a CMFO, can be stored in a private residence. Our department, our inspectors do need to come and evaluate that home or that storage area for that cart. So we will need to gain access to your, backyard or to your garage or whatever it is, so that we can make sure that that cart is stored with a safe and clean area, okay, protected from vermin, protected from mice or cockroaches and things like this. The home has the ability to clean that cart and to store it safely. So that is another big, huge change in the law, allowing stuff to be stored at private homes. Okay. The food that is served off of that cart does need to be prepared in an approved kitchen, but the cart itself can be stored at home, and then in the morning or whatnot, you get your cart, you take it to your nearby restaurant or your market or the food facility that you have partnered with. You cut your fruit, you boil your corn, you prepare whatever foods you're gonna put on that cart, and then you go out for sales, okay? The law, so storing the cart itself at home is now allowed as long as there's not a big problem. The health inspector will do an evaluation of the private home where that cart will be stored. And as long as there's not any problems there, then that can be allowed. The food does need to be prepared at an approved kitchen, though. Okay, so I'm gonna keep coming back to those 2 points. A permitted food facility obviously can support the compact cart or the compact mobile food operation. A permitted food facility, think, restaurants, markets, food facilities in the area, can be approved for the preparation and also for the storage of the cart. Lastly, a commissary. So our existing food truck operators are very well aware of what commissaries are. Commissaries are places that support food trucks, and the food trucks go there for servicing and storing their food and preparing their food and things like that. So a commissary can also support a cart, but that's always been allowed. The change in the law is to make this easier. So now most food facilities, restaurants, markets, bars, permitted food facilities can also support these compact mobile food operations. There is, the last one is a cottage food operation, which is, I could do a whole other talk just about cottage food operations. But that's a special type of permit for foods that are shelf stable to be prepared at home. And if you have a cottage food permit, you can also store your own cart at your home and then take your prepackaged shelf-stable products out for sale on your cart. The minimum requirements to support a compact mobile food operation. So this would be for, this is going to be 2 different ways. So we need to be able to dispose of liquid waste. We need sewer connections. We need mop sinks or sinks. We need trash disposal. So, the dumpster, the regular trash service. Potable water, so the water has to be coming from a fresh, clean, approved source. If you are living in the city of Fresno or in the city of Clovis or whatnot, the water is potable. The water is tested daily, dozens of times, so your water is going to be safe. If you, for example, live out in the county and are on your own well or your own water system, you may have to submit water testing, get your water tested, and provide those results to our department so that we know the water is safe to drink. But for everybody living in the city, it's going to be very easy to say, yes, I get my water from the city of Fresno, city of Clovis, Sanger, Kerman, and we will know that the water is safe to drink. Hot and cold water, so we need hot water for cleaning that cart. We need hot and cold running water. So pretty much everybody's home or apartment is going to have hot and cold running water. They're going to have all of these things, really. And then the last 2 items in here, I put a star on here because some places may be able to do this. Most places should be able to do this, but some places may not be able to. So for a restaurant to support the cart or a food facility to support the cart, they do need an area to prepare the food, a food preparation area. So I put the asterisk, or I put the star on that one because That one's only for food facilities. Food is not allowed to be prepared in a private home. So you would need to go to a restaurant to be able to prepare that food, or a food facility, excuse me. Lastly, we need an area to store the compact mobile food operation. Also, I put a star on that one also because you may store that at the food facility where you're doing the preparation, or you may store that cart at home, but you cannot prepare the foods at home. Okay, so those last two are kind of up in the air, but the first one's liquid waste disposal, potable water, hot and cold water, trash service. Those are the minimum requirements, and pretty much every place should be able to meet those requirements. So this really opens the door of possibilities for places that can service these parts. Okay, so storing the compact mobile food operation at home is allowed with an environmental health endorsement. We need to come evaluate the home, make sure there's clean water, trash service, hot and cold water, liquid waste disposal, and an area to store that cart safely out of the elements. That's either going to be inside a garage, maybe inside the home or the apartment, or perhaps under a covered patio or some way that the equipment can be stored away from the elements and away from vermin. Okay, pre-packaged, non-potentially hazardous food. Okay, so again, from that definition in the beginning, and or whole produce can be stored at the home. So there are a few things that are allowed to be stored at the home with the cart. However, that food cannot be prepared or chopped or sliced or heated or cooked, or any of those steps is not supposed to be done in a private residence. The foods cannot be prepared in a private home. You would need to take those ingredients to the permitted kitchen to prepare, or keep that stuff stored in the permitted kitchen so you show up in the morning, prepare your stuff, load up your compact mobile food operation, and then go out for sale. The environmental health endorsement for storage requires an on-site evaluation. Again, so our inspectors, one of our inspectors will come to your house and do a very non-invasive inspection looking for these minimum requirements. Okay, we are not going to go through all of your rooms and all of your house and all of your drawers and things like this. We just need to make sure that those minimum requirements are being met. If those minimum requirements are met, and there's no public health hazard that would be associated with storing your cart at home, then the residence will be endorsed and you can store that cart at home. Okay. A facility, a food facility, an endorsement is in 972. It's a documented and recorded approval of compliance with those things that we've just been talking about. Clean water, trash service, hot and cold water, an area to store the cart, all of those things. Any food facility or any facility used to store those parts must receive that endorsement, or must be able to obtain that endorsement. Okay, again, it should be pretty darn easy to do that unless there's a big problem at this facility. Endorsement is not the same as a health permit. Endorsement is different than a health permit, so just keep that in mind. An endorsement is a one-time thing where we see that this facility or the residence meets those minimum requirements, and that is all. A permit is required. A permit means there's going to be an annual fee, and that permitted place is subject to routine inspections throughout the year. Where permitted places are going to be the places where the foods are going to be prepared. The endorsed places are the places where that cart can be stored. Okay, the compact mobile food operation can be stored. An endorsed facility, whether that's a private home or one of our permitted facilities, or a church kitchen, a school, a community center, places like this can also be endorsed and don't need to carry a permit if they're just storing that equipment. Okay? We do want to try to make that clear as far as the endorsement and what the differences are with the health permit. Most restaurants and food facilities are going to meet all of these minimum requirements, and they should be able to get endorsed very easily. Also, our permitted food facilities that already have a permit, should be very easy for them to be able to get a permit to support the carts as well. So again, to obtain the endorsement for storing that cart somewhere, whether that's at a private residence, community center, church, school, places like this, you need to reach out and contact our department and request that on-site evaluation for this endorsement, okay? We will send an inspector, actually probably in the beginning, we're gonna be sending a pair of inspectors, so we're not coming into a private home all alone. We'll evaluate the home and the storage area to make sure it meets those minimum requirements. We will give a written documentation that the home or the facility meets those minimum requirements. And so that is the actual endorsement right there. So that would be provided to the homeowner or the facility owner or the tenant, I guess. And the 972 does say that our department can charge an endorsement fee. We can charge small fees to pay for our staff time to come out and do this evaluation. At this time, I don't know, we don't know what that fee might be yet. But the law does say that we can charge an endorsement. So again, the inspector, when they come look at the private residence or the snack bar, the church kitchen, the storage facility, we're gonna be looking for these minimum requirements: the trash disposal, the clean water, hot and cold water, an area to store the compact mobile food operation, and also the ability to clean that compact mobile food operation. Okay? And then the permit is required for the facility where the foods are being prepared. Okay, so this can be an existing restaurant, market, or food facility. And again, I keep mentioning these same things. I want to make sure that this information gets in. So it can also be a church, a community center, a school, things like this. Can also serve as your preparation facility, as long as they're willing to get permitted and be subject to annual inspection. Okay. And the endorsement is different than the health permit. We'll say that again. Enforcement on the compact carts, the SB 972 has some specific enforcement guidelines written into the law. And again, the whole purpose of the law is to make it easier for street vendors and folks to get out and operate within the parameters of the law. So along those lines, the enforcement on these carts is taking a slightly lighter touch than we have historically. So operating a compact mobile food operation without a permit is not a misdemeanor, okay? It is only punishable by administrative fine in these certain amounts listed here, and that's in effect for the whole first year, the all of 2023. After that, in 2024, then the fine or the cost could go up to 3 times the cost of the permit. So that's written into the law as far as these carts go. Operating a restaurant or a food truck without a permit is still a misdemeanor, but operating one of these small carts, specifically written into the law, is saying this is going to be treated as an administrative citation situation for the first year. Now, I just have some slides in here to get some kind of real world examples. I know my slides so far have been very, very text heavy because there's lots of information in there. So thank you for bearing with me. I do have some photos here about what can be a compact mobile food cart or compact mobile food operation, excuse me. So the photo here on the left is a permitted food truck that's actually from here in Fresno, Premio Mayor. That is not eligible to be a compact mobile food op because it's a motorized trailer and it's much larger, and the food operation that's happening in that food truck is well beyond the limited food prep allowed in this law. Okay, so if you're going to be dealing with raw meats and making all kinds of different foods, then the food truck permit would be required. A cart like this, a hot dog stand or a hot dog cart, it doesn't have to be just hot dogs anymore. It could be lots of different kinds of foods. That is could be a compact mobile food operation. This little produce stand right here, the third one, is also eligible or can be a compact food operation. And lastly, this individual, this hawker right here going up and down the stands in the stadium could also be a compact mobile food operation. They're selling prepackaged foods. Hard for me to see on the little screen, that's a little bit easier here. They're selling beers and Cracker Jacks and peanuts, things that are going to be shelf stable and not require refrigeration, right? Obviously, to sell alcohol, you do need an alcohol ABC license, alcohol beverage control license, but that's its own subject there. But the point is, this lady is selling prepackaged foods that don't require temperature control, so she can do it from a little basket or a little rack that she carries around. No refrigeration is required. Very, very simple. So lastly, I have some different examples of how should I say this? The first one is going to be the permit exempt operation. So selling all prepackaged, non-potentially hazardous foods. Is temperature control required? The answer is no. For this situation here, where all the foods are shelf stable and don't require refrigeration, then refrigeration is not going to be required. Okay, steam table is not going to be required because the food itself is going to be safe at room temperature. Does this operation selling this rack or these items on this rack require hand washing? The answer is no, because there's no open food product. Okay, all the food products being sold are packaged and shelf stable, so no temperature control is required, no hand wash station is required. Does this type of operation require a warewashing sink? And the answer is no, because they're not generating any dishes, they're not making any dirty utensils, things like this. So this is our easiest kind of scenario. Okay. What is required is that the food must be safe and wholesome to serve to the public for people to eat. The food needs to come from an approved source so that if there is a problem, somebody says they get sick or anything like this, the source of that food product can be traced back. And if you bought it from Smart and Final or Walmart or whatever, then we can actually go to Walmart, the health inspector or the investigators can do a trace back on that product and find out exactly where it came from through all the stores. Safe and unadulterated food. So as long as that food is safe, comes from approved sources, then it can be served. And as long as it's less than 25 square feet, we would be exempt from having that permit. The stand or the cart or this exempt operation would need to identify themselves as far as having their business name posted, but that's very easy. Get some signs, get some placards, and that can be that requirement can be easily met. Okay. Our next kind of higher level, of limited food preparation would be pre-packaged, so foods that are potentially hazardous, that do require temperature control, but having these foods pre-packaged. So you go to the permitted kitchen nearby, you cut your fruit, you boil your corn, you assemble and prepare all the ingredients and assemble your burritos. Lots of different foods can be made at this permitted facilities. And then if you pre-package that food, all of those food items, and then load them on your cart, you will need temperature control if those foods can potentially spoil. So yes, we would need either a refrigerator or a steam table or some other equipment that can keep the foods either hot or keep the foods cold. But with pre-packaged foods like this, do we need so we need either a steam table here or a refrigerator, something like this, to keep those foods at safe temperature. Does this operation require a hand washing sink? And the answer is no. If there's not open food product being handled, then a hand wash station is not required. So I can see some folks pre-packaging their fruit cups, pre-packaging their burritos, pre-packaging any number of food items, and then loading them onto the cart or the compact mobile food operation for sale. And again, if everything is pre-packaged and there's no open foods on that cart, then a hand washing sink and hand washing station is not required. So that's what I mean. This would be the next simplest operation. Is a warewashing sink required for this situation? The answer is no. If there's no open food products and there's no tongs or knives or cutting boards being dirtied, then the operation does not require a warewashing sink. Okay. Still, the foods need to be from approved sources, need to be safe and wholesome, and the business does need to be identified with their business name and some signage or placarding that would still need to get done. Okay. What about unpackaged potentially hazardous foods? So foods that you are going to handle. The corn vendors that do the mayo and the cheese and things on the corn. The cut fruit vendors who cut the fruit in front of you, which previously was not allowed under California law, is now allowed under this new bill. Okay, so that unpackaged potentially hazardous food. Think, all of the food, the examples of the food items we've been talking about already. Will temperature control be required? The answer is yes. Okay, we do need to have that fridge or that steam table to keep that foods hot or keep the foods cold so that they stay safe. Does this operation require a hand washing sink? The answer is yes, because now we're going to be handling that. We're going to be cutting that fruit. We're going to be putting the condiments on that corn. Now we do need a hand wash station. However, because there's no raw meats, or as long as there is no raw meats being handled, then only cold water is required at that hand wash station. Okay, so that's again a big change from our historical code, and it's taking some training to get my inspectors' heads wrapped around that change. And then lastly, will this operation handling unpackaged potentially hazardous foods need a warewashing sink? The answer could be yes, but if the operator provides spare utensils, extra cutting board, extra knife, extra tongs, all of those utensils and things, as long as the operator can provide spare utensils, then they can avoid having to install a 3-compartment sink on that cart. Okay. Again, the food does need to be from approved sources, needs to be safe and wholesome, and the business needs to be identified with your business name and that information there. Okay, so other foods, how about other prepackaged foods? I've already touched on this just a second ago. Not just limited to corn or fruit. I know that's what we see a lot of out on the streets, but this new law does allow many more types of food than just those few things. Okay, so we could have some prepackaged sandwiches or burritos or lots of different types of food products could be sold from that cart nowadays. Potentially an unpackaged food counter, something like a Subway sandwich on wheels or Chipotle. I kind of use those as references because people kind of know that those businesses you can go in and request, I want that on my sandwich, but not that. And so a cart could do something like that. But again, not handling raw meats and not prepping all of that food out there on the cart. Those items would have to be prepared in the restaurant or the permitted food facility. Cook your meats, make your salsas, cook all your foods, and then you keep that stuff in a steam table or a refrigerator, and now you can assemble that food in front of your client, in front of your customer. And so this really does expand the possibilities of what can be served from a cart. Okay. So for our example right here, this is the same as what we've already talked about, but with a different type of food product here. So again, we would need temperature control for those foods that can spoil if they're not kept at a safe temperature. If the items are all pre-packaged, then a hand wash station is not required. And if there's no open foods being handled and there's no dirty dishes being created, then a warewash sink is not required. The foods do need to be properly labeled. I should mention that, saying where the foods were prepared and what it is. Is this asada burrito? Is this chicken? Is this pork? Whatever it is. All those information needs to be on that product. For our unpackaged food counter, okay? So the previous, what I just mentioned was about a prepackaged thing. Now we're talking about the open kind of assembly line. We do need that temperature control, okay? That refrigerator or steam table. We do need a hand wash station. But again, if you're not dealing with raw meats, not handling raw meats, then you don't need hot water at that hand wash station. Okay? And then again, no warewashing sink, a 3-compartment sink is not required if you can provide spare utensils for use throughout your day. You will need, the cart that's handling all those open food products though, will need an overhead protection over the cart. That's one of the requirements in the law. It says you do need to have overhead protection to keep the dust and the bird stuff and whatever out of the food. And also, food needs to be prepared or assembled in a food compartment. So usually that means I've often seen a plexiglass display case or a glass display case or something like this. Some of our hot dog carts have a little lid that goes over that steam table, and all of those things are considered food compartments. Basically, you need a clean space, so you can prepare and assemble that food. So this is again from my inspectors, but I also threw this out there. Now that we've talked about several examples on when temperature control is required, when hand washing is required, and when warewashing sinks are required, then we have some examples on here about the aguas frescas. Okay, so beverages are allowed to be dispensed from an approved dispenser, something like this thing up on top. That provides temperature control. It keeps the bugs and the flies and the contamination out. And so that's simple. You can dispense into a cup and hand it to your customers. That's a pretty simple operation there. Is the food potentially hazardous? That's one of the big questions going to determine is this allowable or not. For example, cut melons are specifically identified in California law as being potentially hazardous. So the aguas frescas that have the melons in it do need to have that temperature control, do need to have that NSF approved equipment. If it is not potentially hazardous food, then we don't need that refrigerator, that refrigeration equipment. Okay. Is a hand washing station required? So if we're using the dispensers up above that dispenses into a cup, and the beverage itself is protected, then that situation does not require a hand washing sink. The ladling down below, that would require a hand washing sink because now you're handling open, quote unquote, open food product. So if you are ladling, you do need to have a hand washing sink. Warewashing sink is a warewash sink required. Depends on if you're creating dirty utensils and equipment. So the dispenser on the top, the cart would not need to be equipped with a warewashing sink. The ladling down below, the cart would either need a warewashing sink or need spare utensils, need extra ladles and things like that, so we can meet that requirement. Okay. Oops, sorry, and the ladling does require a food compartment, a enclosure to keep that food handling area protected from contamination. Okay, so the last slide here, I just put our phone number on here, and I also put a link to the text, the actual language of SB 972, so folks can read that law or kind of read that. That's it. Thank you all very, very much. I'm sure people are going to have a lot of questions right now. I don't know if our moderator wants to take questions now or we want to do that at the end. But that's my portion. So thank you all very much.
Why don't we go ahead and start off with a few questions?
Please repeat the question in the microphone. Sure.
Is the slide going to be available for us?
Yes, the question is, are these slides going to be available? The answer is yes. We do have this presentation available, and also we have had it translated into Spanish, and the full versions of this are going to be available on the website, yes. In the back, yeah?
I have a question. I don't know if you based on it, but, I know you said food cart, what about like if you go to a station, at a location, you take things out and start setting up to, sell, that like requires like, like you set up propane and cookware like that, is that part of food cart, or that's something that's a little different than what you have to say?
So I need a little bit more information before I can answer that. So
For example, like, people put up tents and then they put propane, cookware, and they start selling like hot foods and stuff like that without a food truck or a little cart, whatever you're saying, to people hot food and propane, stuff like that.
So
And I know we see that in the city, and that's why I'm here, I wanna know about that too.
gotcha. So I think the question is about, what I understand it was about setting up a little pop-up stand. A lot of people now call them pop-ups. Having a little canopy or whatnot in your grill and your prepping and selling food out on the streets. We do see this a lot. I'm not lying to this. I live in Fresno and we see it happening. That type of operation specifically is not going to be allowed under this law. If it's the thing that I am imagining or the thing that we typically see out on the streets,
It's
okay?
kind of like if you're going to a picnic, you take everything out, but you're selling it to the public. That's what I'm saying, so I know food truck has a little regulations though.
Right.
And that's why I thought, I wanted to know if that's part of this, food cart, because I know some of them do have a food cart next to it, but they do have their little, like, propane and tables and everything, like a picnic setup, so that's why I wanna know, I wanna know more information.
Got it. So the thing in the back is talking about these stands that will set up in a corner in the park in a random location and set up their grills and start cooking and selling food. Not from a food truck, not from an actual cart, but just from tables and grills and ice chests and things like this. That is still an unpermitted vendor, and that is still not allowed under the law. And those folks are subject to enforcement action from our department as well as the city. Okay, this new compact mobile food law. One of the requirements is that all of the equipment be integral. So all the equipment be bolted on or somehow assembled together. So it's not a table over here and a grill over there and a hand wash sink in the back of my truck. It's all of that stuff put together on one unit, so we know all the equipment is together and it can't be forgotten. And we'll need to do an inspection and make sure all that equipment is functional, and then they can get a permit for that cart that everything is kind of assembled together. So setting up a grill stand on the street corner, that's much different, and that's definitely beyond the scope of this law. So this law is trying to partner with local restaurants and food facilities to prepare the food some way that's in a safe and permitted location. Oftentimes those folks setting up on the street corners or whatnot, are just doing this from home. So yeah, that is different and is not allowed under this law.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
You repeated the food cannot be prepared at a private home. Can the home be inspected for the food to actually be prepared just like any other facility?
So the question.
Like a bakery or a restaurant?
So the question is about preparing foods at home. So 970, this new law, does not allow foods to be prepared in a private home. It says specifically that foods are not allowed to be prepared in a private home. The one situation that is acceptable or is permittable is called a cottage food operation. And cottage food law was passed in California several years ago. It allows very certain shelf-stable foods to be prepared at home. Things that don't require refrigeration and are not going to spoil. The state has a very specific list of foods that can be prepared at home. And if you propose or apply to prepare food that's not on that list, the answer is going to be no. So very certain specific foods can be made at home with a cottage food permit. But just in general, the question was about baking things or cooking foods at home, and that's not going to be allowed. Okay, so only under a cottage food permit can food be prepared at home. Again,
You also talked about labeling the food correctly. On the label, are you talking about the specific ingredients in the food product or just the new?
so the question here was about labeling, and I love that question. That's a good one. So didn't include a bunch of information about labeling in this presentation. I didn't want to get bogged down on those details, but we do have handouts available in our office. I'm not sure if they're on the website at this moment, but we do have information about federal food labeling and packaging requirements, and so we can get that to you. Basically, the common, so what the label requires, the common name of the food. It's a burrito, it's a sandwich, it's whatever. The ingredients that went into that food, okay? The location where that food was prepared. So we need to know what the food is, what's in it, and that's in case of the customer might have allergies to some of those ingredients. That's why that information needs to be on the label. How big or how much the food is, 3 ounces, 10 ounces, a dozen cookies, whatever. So the quantity or the amount of food, and then also the last part is where did it come from. So that is the information that would need to be on labeling, and we have informational handouts about that available in our office. Next question.
¿Qué pasará con esas personas que no entren a este programa y preparan comida en casa, en días o desde su casa y desde su día?
So can you help me with that?
¿Qué pasará con las personas que no entran al programa y van a en la calle o en su casa para vivir en sus alimentos? ¿Qué va a pasar?
What's going to happen with those people who will not be able to adhere and are still working at home or selling from their home to prepare their foods? What will happen?
It's a great question. So the question was basically about what are enforcement or what's going to happen to folks that continue to operate from home and continue to not follow the requirements of the law. So those operators, those folks are subject to enforcement action. It could be from our department, from the county health department. It could also be from the city code enforcement. So each city does run their own code enforcement team. Those folks can do write tickets. And so the city can do their own enforcement. The county health department, we can also do our enforcement action where we can impound the food and take the equipment from the operator. And so we also have an enforcement process as well. Anybody? Go.
So the question is regarding the packaged foods, will the carts also need permits from the Department of Health, the annual permit that you mentioned?
So the question is a permit going to be required? And so we need more information about specific what foods you're going to be selling and where those foods are coming from. Again, if an operation is 25 square feet or less and is all prepackaged shelf-stable foods from approved sources, and again, less than 25 square feet, then you're permit exempt. If you're talking about prepackaged foods, cut fruit, corn, burritos, things like this that you prepare and package in a facility somewhere, and then you take it out for sale in the cart, yes, that will require a permit because it is not a shelf-stable food. Okay, so if the question was, do I need a permit for prepackaged foods? It depends on what exactly those foods are. Go ahead.
Quiero saber si por qué no dejan cocinar en casa tus errores y luchadores. Es la pregunta que tengo.
So my question is, why are we not allowed to cook our corn from home and chicharrones or the fritters?
So 972, and historically, food code has said that foods are not allowed to be prepared in a private home because that private home is not inspected. We do not know, there's not a way for us to gain access and to know the conditions of that home. When a facility has a permit, That means that the health inspectors can enter that facility and do an inspection during normal business hours. So just, it's all, how do I answer that? Because we cannot be sure of the conditions in somebody's home, that is why food is not allowed to be prepared at home.
O si van, si,
He has a follow-up question here.
van a inspeccionar el carrito, si van a inspeccionar el carrito es lo mismo que van a ir a chequear a los garajes, van a estar como lo vamos a tener.
If you're going to inspect the cart, it's the same thing that you would be inspecting if you went over to our garage
Van a
and
estar
checked.
chequeando.
Oh, I understand. So I believe the question now is if a private home can be endorsed to store that cart, why can that private home not be permitted to sell or to prepare the foods at home? And the answer is the way that 972 is written, and historically the law's been written, it just straight up says food cannot be prepared in a private home. Unless it's that cottage food permit, then it's allowed. Okay. You had a question up front?
My question is, do we have any restriction about locations, like where we can be, where we cannot be?
So yes, a good question. The question is there any restrictions on the location on where these sales can occur or not occur? And the answer, that's a great question. The answer is it's gonna be up to each city jurisdiction. So different cities do have different rules about where and when food trucks and businesses and things can operate. So for example, I know I deal with permitting food trucks all the time. And City of Fresno tends to be very easy to sell food in as long as you're in a commercial area. City of Clovis and Sanger and Kerman are much more restrictive. They're a smaller town and they kind of want to protect their local businesses or whatnot. And so they'll have certain locations where those food trucks or carts or whatnot can operate. So it depends on the city. Different cities do
For
have different
example,
rules.
here, do you have any list that we can see, like, we can put our businesses?
So the question is, what about specifically here in the city of Fresno? I believe the code enforcement, and the city, maybe the business tax office can answer that question more, better than I can. So as the county health department, we want to make sure that people have the ability to wash hands and the knowledge to prepare food safely. Where and when you operate is going to be up to each city. Okay, so you get the permit from us that says you can prepare food safely, then the city rules or ordinances would say where and when in that city you can operate.
And do we have any restrictions with time, like, for example, for a special event, it's only 4 hours. So do we have any restriction in that?
So the question is there any time restrictions, or you can't operate for this long, or you can't operate past a certain late at night or whatnot? And so again, that is going to be up to the city where you're going to be selling. The health department is concerned with the knowledge and the ability to prepare food safely and to keep it at safe temperatures. The cities are going to have their say in where and when that cart or that food truck or that business can operate. Okay, so it's going to be a question for the city. In the back, and then I'll come to you next.
Hey, yes, I have a question
Yes.
regarding if you have an approved facility with a permit, and let's say you wanted to put something in like a smoker outside or like a wood burning pizza oven, is that allowed?
So the question is a permitted facility, permitted kitchen, food facility, restaurant, whatnot, being allowed to use a grill or a smoker,
Facility.
and outdoor cooking equipment. That is allowed for restaurants and permitted food facilities. That would be allowed.
Oh,
Yes, you can grill up your, smoke your tri-tip or whatever it is. Bring that back in the kitchen, cut it, slice it, make sandwiches, make burritos. And as long as that food is maintained at proper temperatures on the cart, it can be sold from the cart. So yes, good question. Let me come back up front first.
The question is regarding the home. So understanding that you can't prepare food in a private home, what if the home, is there a possibility of meeting requirements as a commercial kitchen, say a conversion of a garage to meet those requirements? Is that a possibility, or is that completely out of the picture just because it is still your home, or can that be separated?
So I would say it's a very, very tight, very almost impossible. Okay, so the question was, can a private home, can a portion of a private home obtain a permit? And so that's a big question. The city planning department is going to have a say on that, and usually they are not going to approve a business in a residential zone. And so you might need to get a change in the zoning designation for your property. It's gonna be slightly easier to do that if you're out in the county somewhere than if you're in a neighborhood that's a big neighborhood with a bunch of homes. So it's gonna be very difficult to get your private home permitted as a food facility, just in general. So I would say very, very hard. In the back?
Now, say you obtain a cottage permit, are you able to do a cottage permit?
So the question is, if an operator has a cottage food permit, are they allowed to do a pop-up, basically set up a table and sell their products? So yes, a cottage food permit, cottage food operator that is packaging and labeling shelf-stable foods. So now we've got pre-packaged, non-potentially hazardous foods. If you have 25 square feet or less of display area, you don't even need a permit for that compact mobile food operation. So you can prepare your cottage food products, your approved cottage food products at home, package them and label them, and then set it up on a tabletop or whatnot at the farmer's market or even on the street corner. That can be done, yes. Pre-packaged, non-potentially hazardous food is permit exempt, as long as it's less than that certain square footage requirement. Good question. I think we're almost out of time, or we're getting into the next portion, but I'll take the one question that.
You mentioned a pop-up, having your food already packaged or anything or whatever. What if you're going to pop up and you're cooking there, like how you mentioned, I don't know if it's like a city question, but could we cook there? Because we have all our refrigerator, we have our setup, and everything's all connected. Are we able to do that as well?
So the question is about operating a pop-up and grilling and cooking food products there in the tent or in the booth itself. So that type of operation is allowable under code at an approved community event, at the farmer's market, at the Cinco de Mayo, 4th of July, Harvest Festival, whatever it is, at that specific approved community event is when temporary food facilities, which is what the law calls pop-ups, or people call, the public calls pop-ups, is actually a temporary food facility in the law, are only allowed at approved community events. So people do set up those stands out on the street corner, the same setup that you might see at River Park Farmers Market or Kerman Farmers Market or whatever, is approved at that farmers market. But if you set up that stand on the street corner by itself, it's no longer approved.
So you're saying approved, besides having, obviously we need our cottage permit, right, for that?
I missed.
We need the cottage permit for that too, right?
You need, so a cottage food, so I'm not quite understand. So the cottage food permit is for prepackaged shelf-stable foods, not for grilling tacos or grilling meats and things like that. So they're slightly different things. Okay. Any last questions before we go on to the next? Yes.
I work off of mobile food permitted from Fresno County. Do they still, under this law, do they still need to go get endorsed, or because they already permitted?
To do what?
To do the food prep.
So the question is, this lady has a permitted food truck, and I do remember you from I think Long Year, right? So I'm not quite understanding the question. The question is, does the food truck need an endorsement?
Do I need, so what if I get one of these cards, I can prepare food in my mobile food truck, right?
Oh.
Or does it need to be, do I need to pay that fee to get it endorsed?
That's a great question. So the question was, with a permitted food truck, can the permitted food truck be allowed to prepare food for the cart? I don't know the answer to that one. I gotta find out. That's a good question. I haven't even thought about that one yet. So I'd have to talk to management, and I'd have to talk to my other counties in the state to figure that one out. So that's a good one. You got me. So nothing else. Thank you all for your time and attention very, very much. And we're gonna hand it off to the next speaker here. But myself and my supervisors are here, and my partner here is also, we can answer questions once the meeting is done. Thank you folks very much.